If you've been living under a rock lately, not Black Rock, but if you've been living under a rock lately, last week we had the collapse of three banks. It started with Silvergate, which was on Wednesday. It was on Wednesday. Then 2 days later, on Friday, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. That was the big one that's really kind of causing the chaos that's been going on lately. And then on Sunday, we had Signature Bank close. Now, a couple things to keep in mind is Silicon Valley Bank, or SVB. They were the 18th largest bank. Some people are saying 18th, some people are saying 16th. It's a large bank. So one of the largest banks, but it's also the second largest bank to fail by assets in U.S. history, followed by Signature Bank, which is actually the third bank to collapse. So this is the biggest bank failure since the Lehman Brothers situation, where, if you remember, that was the 2008 crash, the crisis. It was mainly the housing market, and it bled out contagion into other areas. That was a pretty significant thing, if you can remember that. If you haven't looked into it, I would look into it. What we're seeing now is going to be 2008 on steroids type of situation there. So, to kind of give you a representation of how big this SVB thing is, if we take a look at this, total assets of failed U.S. banks by the year. So if you go back to 2008, you will see that is the giant tower there at the end, almost hitting 400 billion. If you look at what's going on in 2003, the far right tower, that's not all the banks that have collapsed so far. That is only SVB. That is only Silicon Valley Bank. So you can just see that one bank has it's actually just a little over half of the assets that failed in 2008. So that should show you why everything is so crazy right now with what's been going on as far as the markets go. We know Monday there was a huge downturn in regional banks. So this is the one that a lot of people are watching for, is the regional banks, where everybody's now pulling out and going to the big ones. We'll talk about that in a second. But we saw that, and then today it kind of upticked, and then all of a sudden there's a giant swing down again on regional banks. So everybody thought, oh, the crisis is over. The regional banks are going back to normal. Everything's fine. The U.S. bailed it out. They don't want to say it's a bailout, but it's a bailout. That's what's going on with that. They bailed out these banks. And so what's going on as far as this goes is this was planned ahead of time. Now, I've been kind of digging into who's been involved, what's been happening beforehand. We know the plan is to ultimately destroy the financial system that's there now, because you have to destroy what's in place in order to bring in the new. And we know the new is going to be the central bank digital currency, and then ultimately the beast coin, the beast economy, the beast currency, the one world currency that's coming. And so you have to get rid of what's there. And so I kind of did a little bit of digging into why this would collapse the way it is. And it's not an accident. A lot of people, they like to put it on, oh, everybody's involved. They're making stupid decisions. They're not making smart decisions. Are they really this dumb? And every name in the book for being a moron, pretty much. These people aren't stupid. Now, the people who are, the underlings that are controlling this stuff, like the U.S. Fed and everything like that, they're reading scripts. But there's a much higher up entity, the elites, the shadow governments, that they know what they're doing. So from our perspective as just peons for them, peasants, we're supposed to sit there and go, wow, these people are dumb. Why are they doing what they're doing? But it's all planned. So if we take a look at some of the people that have been involved. If you look at SVB's CEO, Greg Becker. He was, so he's the CEO, is the CEO of the bank, was, however you want to put it. He was director of the San Francisco Federal Reserve. So at the same time that he was the CEO of this bank, he was the director of the San Francisco Fed up until the collapse. The day of the collapse, he was booted out. Something also to keep in mind is he dumped 2.27 million of his stock on February 27th. This was 12 days before the bank collapsed. He knew what was coming. He was obviously told or was involved with making this happen. And so he got his money out before it collapsed. So that's a big sign we knew what was going on. Some of the other people involved, we know CEO Becker, he sold the 11%, so his 2.27 million. The CFO of SVB, Beck, he sold 32% of his holdings 12 days before. And then the CMO, Draper, she sold 28% of her stock 12 days before. So all three of those top dogs sold a major amount of stock 12 days before the event happened. They knew what was coming. They knew it was coming. They planned this. It was on the way. Now, if you look at the SVB chief admin officer, his name is Joseph Gentile. It's kind of an interesting last name, honestly. But he was the CFO. You can't make this up. He was the CFO for Lehman Brothers until 2007 when he joined SVB. So the chief administration officer for SVB was he was the CFO of Lehman Brothers right before the 2008 crash when Lehman, basically triggered the tanking. So you're looking at some of these people who were involved, clearly knew what was going on, probably coordinated the event to make it happen. So if you look at who they are, the background, when they sold their stuff, all this happens. Then you take a look at Peter Thiel, which a lot of people are now saying he was the one that triggered the bank run on SVB, which caused their collapse. But if you look at Peter Thiel's Founders Fund, they withdrew all of their cash from SVB before Thursday, which was a day before the collapse. So he knew what was coming as well. They wanted to say, they messed something up with his administration or whatever, and so they were Peter Thiel was pulling out because of that. I look at it as they knew what was coming. They knew what was coming. They were planning for it. And we know Peter Thiel, even though a lot of conservatives like to look at him as somebody to look up to, we've talked a lot about Peter Thiel before. Dude is evil and definitely a pawn and a part of all this. So something to keep in mind. Also, Friday, hours before the bank was seized, SVB paid out their annual bonuses for employees. They had cash on hand. That was the other thing. They had no cash. They had no liquidity. They did. They had cash on hand. They paid out the bonuses that Friday, right before they closed, hours before, actually. So we're seeing what was going on. Everything was planned. They had everything in order. They knew what was going on. All the people involved, they had other interests. They worked for other places before. They also pulled their stock out ahead of time. I mean, that in itself should be enough on that. Then you also look at the fact of that Sunday, they had it planned where they were trying to hold an auction. They were going to have SVB sold off before the Asian markets opened. And come to find out a couple days later, or that Monday, they had multiple bids for it, and the regulators declined all of them, basically forcing the bank to collapse. That was the cherry on top. That was the, take the cake and eat it too. They had a chance to save it, and they didn't. They chose to let it fail. So that should be enough right there to tell you what's going on. Now, that's SVB. If you want to take a quick jaunt over to Signature Bank, which was the one that closed on Sunday, the director of Signature Bank, his name is Barney Frank, was the chair of the House Financial Services Committee from 2007 to 2011, and he gets a lot of credit for helping create the bank bailouts for the 2008 and 2009 crash. So you have this guy now who was basically a part of the team that coordinated the 2008 crash and helped put all the stimulus bailout money out. Well, he was the director of Signature Bank, and look at what happened to them on Sunday. So that should tell you everything as far as this goes. So the second and third largest bank failures in U.S. history, the people who were in control of them, questionable people is not even the term. You can take that higher, but you catch my drift on that. So this is clearly planned. Now, if we take a look at a video from November 9th of 2022, the FDIC had a meeting where they were wargaming how to hide bank runs, how to make sure that the general population doesn't quite know what's going on. They reference how everything is done by like Twitter now because people want to know everything that's going on and stuff. It's all about wargaming on how to do this strategically where people don't know what's going on and basically collapse the system and get away with it type of thing. So here's about a 2-minute video of that FDIC meeting so you guys can get an idea of just how evil these people are if you haven't figured that out yet.
There was a lot of interest just after the crisis. It's dwindled over time. And so people are sort of less and less interested in getting into the nitty-gritty and some of the really interesting developments. So I would think your strategy ought to be to disclose as much as possible to people who professionally need to know about it. And that would certainly include the ratings agencies and the people within the banks who are responsible for these judgments. And simply have publicly available a place where people can go if they need to know more. Because we're dealing with a society where people are getting their information in tweets. There's just no patience, I think, for going through the elaborate and careful planning that has gone on. It should be there. It should be accessible when people need to know. But I don't think you have much hope of reaching a public that doesn't have a professional need to know.
I completely agree with that. I almost think you'd scare the public if you put this out. Like, why are they telling me this? Should I be concerned about my bank? Like, my insurance company doesn't tell me what they're doing with my assets. They just assume they're going to pay my claim, right? I think you've got to think of the unintended consequences of taking a public that has more full faith and confidence in the banking system than maybe people in this room do. That we want them to have full faith and confidence in the banking system. They know the FDIC insurance is there. They know it works. They put their money in. They're going to get their money out. So there's a select crowd of people that are in the institutional side. And if they want to understand this, they're going to find a way to understand this. There's a bunch of law firms represented in this room. There's a bunch of people that'll charge them by the hour a lot of money to explain this all to them. And it's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And they all have huge staffs. But I would be careful about the unintended consequences of starting to blast too much of this out in the general public.
So I'd like
well, you got Mr. and Mrs. Chuckles there in the room, just laughing it up, smiling. They always have the grin, they're always happy because they understand that they're not the ones that are getting messed up in this situation. They even said it's like, oh, the people out there, they've got more faith in the banking system than, of course, we do. They're laughing because they understand that they've got the ultimate Ponzi scheme. And there's this thing that's going around. Usually it's the people who don't have, I don't want to say not all of them are Christians, but I want to say a lot of them don't have the mindset of, well, we know prophecy, we know what's coming, we're not going to win a fight against this. Because there's a lot of people calling for like revolution and everything. And we have the script ahead of time. The scripture clearly tells us what's coming. We know that there's going to be no revolution from here on out. But there's this idea of that we can beat what they're doing, and they're sitting there laughing and grinning and smiling because they know that they can't be beat. They've got this perfect system set up where it's not broken. That's the thing, is a lot of people want to say that this system is broken. It's not broken. It was built this way. It was built this way. And you look, if you go through all throughout history and you look at all the, how there's always the saying, well, empires only last a certain amount of time. Well, financial systems only last a certain amount of time. And we're past that clock. We're past the clock that most of these systems go. And so it's going to happen. And then the one that's going to be coming in, of course, is going to be that one world currency system. It's going to be the Antichrist system. It's going to be the combination of the CBDC and the carbon credits and the digital ID and all of this stuff that works together. Now, something else to keep in mind when this happened is you take a look at what happened also on Friday. U.S. layoffs jump to mark the worst start to a year since 2009. So I've been kind of keeping track of what's been going on with all the layoffs, and I'll tell you what, tech and transportation and retail and banking and real estate have all been getting hammered silently. They've been releasing them in waves where if you're not actively looking for it, you're not going to know what's going on. And the blood in the streets situation is going to be coming. It's going to be coming. It's not here yet, but it's going to be coming where all of a sudden you're going to start seeing basically what happened in 2008. You can actually look up old news videos on YouTube of what happened during that. And it's just news everywhere. These banks laid off 90% of their staff. This company laid off 95% of their staff. That's the blood in the street stuff, and it's coming. And something that I just put out there is Meta, which is the parent group of Facebook. Not only did they just cut 10,000 jobs a couple months ago, well, they're going to be cutting another 10,000 jobs coming up. And so the layoffs continue. This is definitely something to pay attention to. You're noticing the faltering in not only the economy, but now we've got it going on with the banking system. And these people are creating the problem, then they create the solution, and then, hey, we've got the solution. Come follow us. Come be dependent upon us. Something else to keep in mind is they just released the CPI data today, which we know their CPI, which CPI is basically your inflation numbers. We know the numbers that they put out are fake, but they're using them for their situation. And CPI went up, which is a good indicator that they're probably going to raise hikes or hike rates again. That's what causes the breaking of this anyways. And it's a good indicator that they're probably going to do it again. Now, this is where the Fed, the Federal Reserve, they painted themselves into a corner. Because if they raise the rates again, they're going to continue to break the banking system. If they pivot and they start loosening, then you're talking about black horse level of hyperinflation, which we know the horsemen, they don't come until later. In my opinion, this is just my opinion. I'm not a financial guy. I do the best I can because I follow private investors and I have a couple that I can ask questions here and there. But from my understanding is they're going to continue to tighten, which means this banking system is probably going to start breaking even more than it already is now, to the point where you might start seeing some bigger banks start faltering. We've seen Charles Schwab recently not do too good. The only reason why Charles Schwab went up today is because the head guy, the CEO, he bought like 500 million of his own stock to try and keep them level. So in my opinion, I think that they're going to continue to tighten and the rates are going to go up and the banking system is going to continue to break. That's just my opinion. Again, I'm not a financial guy. This is not financial suggestion or anything, just letting you know where my thought is on this. Then there's another aspect of this, which this is my thinking of where this is going. This is my thinking of what they're doing. And we're kind of seeing kind of an aspect of this. Before I get into that, just take a look at this video. I posted this on my Telegram, but he kind of puts the cards out on the table for everybody to see. Quick little video. Check this out. And then I'll kind of go from there.
The principle needs to be that all depositors will be protected and have full access to their accounts Monday morning.
All depositors, meaning those with accounts bigger than $250,000, which is the cutoff for insurance right now.
Yes, all of them. There's precedent for this. Chair Powell, when he was at Treasury in 1991, the Bank of New England collapsed. And Chair Powell said that Treasury coordinated with FDIC and with the Fed, and they ensured every depositor then. And why did they do it? They didn't want a regional run on the banks. Here's what I'm hearing from people in my constituency. They are getting notes to pull out of regional banks, and all of this will be consolidated in the top 4 banks. We don't want that as a nation, especially if you're progressive. The other thing is the payroll companies that are involved. Some of them have 400,000 folks. They're not going to be able to meet payroll if they don't have access to the deposits.
All right. So on this, you kind of gave some good information going up into that good information. You got to make sure when these people are talking, there's a lot of lies that come out, but they do give us stuff here and there. So it is good to kind of pay attention to that. He specifically tells us people are going to be pulling out of regional banks and putting it into the top 4 banks. So this is where my thinking is coming. I've been watching the GSIBs for a while. GSIB is globally systemic important bank. And these are the big guys, the ones that are completely controlled. They're the ones that basically run the governments and everything. These are the huge banks. And so my thought is, from when I first started looking into this, is the easy way to get everybody into a digital currency is to pull out of the small regional banks and funnel money into the GSIBs. Now, the 8, he said 4, which it is possible that these 8 could, 4 of them could get swallowed up into the other 4. But as of right now, the 8 GSIBs in the US are Bank of America, Bank of New York Mellon, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, State Street. State Street's one of those big guys I talk about, and Wells Fargo. So those are the 8 GSIBs. Those are the guys that are in the US that are connected to all the other big banks in Europe and Asia and Australia and all these other places as well. And so he said 4, it is possible that 4 of those get sucked up in. But we're already starting to see this plan in action, and it's coming out. So if we take a look at some of the stuff that's been coming out, we got Market Watch here that says regional banks are seeing flight of deposits to too big to fail mega banks. Those are your GSIBs. Then on the right there, we've got from the Financial Times, large U.S. banks inundated with new depositors as smaller lenders face turmoil. It talks about failure of Silicon Valley Bank prompts flight to JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup. Those are 2 GSIBs. Down, and then, of course, at the bottom, if you pay attention, large banks such as JP Morgan Chase are trying to accommodate customers wanting to move deposits quickly. So this is what I've been looking for. This is what I've been paying attention to, is what's going on with that. There is billions right now. Billions with a B, billions getting pulled out of your small regional banks and being put into the big ones. This is the funneling of money into the GSIBs. And so what would happen after this, to make it easy, is when all that money gets put into there, these banks can then just take that, switch it over to central bank digital currency. And everybody's saying, oh, you won't even need the regional banks and stuff like that. You could still use the regional banks. You just then connect everybody on there using the atomic ledger system. And then you have all the regional banks that are now all connected to Mr. Big Daddy Bank. So it would be a flush of funds from the regionals to the giants. Easy transition to the CBDCs. So this would basically be your digital bailout at this point. So we've seen the regular bailout that's going on right now that's floundering, to say the least. This would be the digital bailout, saying, well, we can't even bail out the banks now with fiat money. We can do it with the central bank digital currency system. So that's my thought on where this is going. This is the thing to pay attention to, is where this money is getting funneled. And we're starting to see even some small moves where, like Wells Fargo, they made a couple moves now where they're even preparing. Now, again, don't take this and run with it. This is just what I'm seeing. And it's a possibility that happens where Wells Fargo they're making moves where they're even preparing for themselves to possibly merge with another one of those bigger banks. And so that could be one of the GSIBs getting swallowed up into the other GSIB. Don't panic. If you're Wells Fargo, this doesn't mean that it's going to happen. I'm just giving you guys a heads up that I have seen those workings happen today. So again, don't panic, but I just want to give you guys that information that they could be making the bigger moves on the bigger banks for this system to happen. So that's kind of what I've been seeing with this banking system. Obviously, it was planned, and I think it's working its way towards funneling up to those GSIBs. And of course, ultimately, we know the final destination on that's going to be the central bank digital currency, which will be a part of the Beast Coin, your one world currency.